In this video, we will be installing a new ACT performance clutch. This video features the installation of our Mod Twin Street Kit. However, kits are available in different configurations based on the torque being produced at the crankshaft and your style of driving. The installation procedure will be the same except for the discs and monodrive hub being used. While this video provides the basics on how to remove and install a clutch, it is in no way intended to replace a factory service manual. Please visit our website for a complete listing of kits for this application. Note that our vehicle has been modified with multiple non-OEM parts, and as so, some steps may differ for your particular vehicle. Disconnect both the negative and positive battery cables. Unfasten the battery hold down and then remove the battery from the engine compartment. Remove the battery tray. Unfasten and remove the front bumper and grille assembly. Loosen the clamps at the bottom and top of the lower charge air cooler outlet pipe. And then remove the lower charge air cooler outlet pipe from the vehicle. Loosen the clamp at the throttle body and at the blow-off valve hose and remove the upper charge air cooler outlet pipe. Unplug the mass airflow sensor. Disconnect the vacuum hose from the blow-off valve. Loosen the clamp at the turbo inlet and then remove the intake pipe assembly. Remove both driver and passenger side wheel and tire assemblies. On the passenger side, remove the cotter pin and remove the axle nut and washer. On the driver's side, remove the cotter pin and remove the axle nut and washer. Remove the transmission drain plug and drain the oil. Reinstall the drain plug with a new gasket and tighten it to 24 foot-pounds. On the driver's side, remove the bolt and nut securing the lower ball joint. Remove the lower ball joint from the knuckle assembly. Remove the axle from the hub assembly and then remove the axle from the transmission. On the passenger side, remove the bolt and nut securing the lower ball joint. Remove the lower ball joint from the knuckle assembly. Remove the axle from the hub assembly and then remove the axle from the transmission. Remove the transfer case, drain plug, and drain the oil. Reinstall the drain plug with a new gasket and tighten it to 24 foot-pounds. Unbolt and remove the rear subframe support bar, then unbolt and remove the front subframe support bar. Loosen the hardware for the front motor mount. Unbolt the cross member. Remove the bolt from the front motor mount and then remove the cross member and motor mount assembly from the vehicle. Unfasten the hardware at the front and rear of the downpipe. Remove the rubber isolators from the hangers and then remove the downpipe from the vehicle. Remove the output shaft from the driver's side of the transmission. This usually requires a special tool. However, we were able to make do with some miscellaneous hardware and a pry bar. Be careful that the spline portion of the output shaft does not damage the oil seal. Unfasten the transfer case. Unbolt the drive shaft carrier bearing. Separate the transfer case from the transmission and remove the drive shaft from the transfer case. Not shown in the video, secure the transfer case toward the passenger side of the vehicle away from the transmission. Disengage the electrical connector at the top of the transmission. Unbolt the slave cylinder and place it out of the way. Not shown in the video, you will have to unclip and free the hydraulic line from the bracket located at the top of the transmission. Remove the clips securing the shift cables and then remove the cables from the levers. Unfasten the shift cable bracket from the transmission and then move the cables and bracket up and out of the way. Disengage the electrical connector at the top rear of the transmission. Unbolt the rear transmission mount. Unbolt and remove the rear transmission mount bracket. Through the service hole at the bottom of the bell housing, using a flat screwdriver, disconnect the release bearing from the pressure plate. Remove the starter power wire and then remove the starter. Unbolt and remove the bell housing bolts. Unbolt the transmission mount. Place a support under the engine. Disengage the transmission from the engine and remove it from under the vehicle. Unbolt and remove the pressure plate and disc. Unbolt and remove the flywheel. Unbolt the release fork shaft. Remove the release fork boot. Disconnect the release fork springs. Remove the release fork shaft and then remove the release fork and bearing assembly from the transmission. Clean off any dirt, grime, or grease from the release fork shaft, guide tube, and input shaft splines, and from the release fork. If the vehicle has high mileage, we recommend replacing the clutch fork with a new unit. Using the Ceram lube included with your clutch kit, lightly coat the guide tube and input shaft splines. Lightly coat the spline of the monohub and then slide the monohub onto the input shaft to spread the lube evenly. Remove the monohub and wipe off any excess lube. Lightly coat the release fork shaft and then set it into position on the transmission. Apply a small amount of lube to all the pivot surfaces of the release fork. Place the release bearing onto the fork and place the fork and bearing assembly into position on the transmission. Set the springs and washers into position on the fork and insert the shaft through the release fork into position. Tighten the bolt securing the release fork shaft to 7 foot-pounds. Push the springs back into position and check the operation of the release fork and bearing assembly. Install the release fork boot back into the transmission housing. Clean the flywheel mounting surface to make sure it is free from rust, oil, and dirt. Using a thread locking compound, install the flywheel and bolts until they are snug. It is recommended that new flywheel bolts are used. Tighten the bolts to a temporary 30 foot-pounds in a star pattern, and then torque them to a final 96 foot-pounds again in a star pattern. Make sure to clean the flywheel friction surface area with a non-petroleum-based cleaner. Assemble the clutch starting with the pressure plate cover upside down. Making sure the pivot ring is in position, place the diaphragm spring onto the pivot ring with the monolock collar facing down. Be sure to align the holes in the diaphragm spring with the anti-rotation pins. Slide the clutch face with the pivot side toward the diaphragm spring and the flat side facing up. Make sure to clean the friction surface area with a non-petroleum based cleaner. Install the first friction plate with trans side facing down toward the diaphragm spring. Engage the drive gear of the monodrive hub into the friction plate with trans side facing down. Clean both sides of the floater plate with a non-petroleum based cleaner and then slide the floater plate in place over the wear plates. Line up the second friction plate onto the drive gear with trans side facing down. Prepare the clutch bolts and washers with a small amount of thread locking compound and have them within reach of the installed flywheel or get some assistance. Place the assembly onto the flywheel and start the clutch bolts into the flywheel threads. You may have to slightly compress the assembly to get the bolts started. Do not tighten the bolts. With the clutch supported by the bolts, slide the alignment tool in place so it engages the splines and pilot area. Make sure the diaphragm did not shift from the anti-rotation pins and the friction plates did not shift from the monodrive hub during assembly. Align the clutch disc assembly as best as possible so the alignment tool has the freest movement. Then begin to tighten the bolts in a star pattern so the diaphragm spring will evenly compress until they are all snug. Torque the pressure plate bolts to 25 foot-pounds and then remove the alignment tool. Lift the transmission back into place and install the transmission mount. Tighten the 4 nuts securing the mount to the transmission to 35 foot-pounds. And then tighten the large bolt and nut to 71 foot-pounds. Install the bell housing bolts, making sure to reinstall any ground wires and torque the bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Not shown in the video, seat the clutch release bearing into the monolock collar by pushing the clutch release fork toward the driver's side of the vehicle. Install the starter and tighten the hardware to 27 foot-pounds. Reinstall and secure the power wire. Lube the tip of the slave cylinder push rod and then install the slave cylinder into position and tighten the bolts to 15 foot-pounds. Install the hydraulic line back into the bracket, securing it with the clip. Install the rear transmission mount bracket and tighten the hardware to 68 foot-pounds. Not shown in the video, attach the electrical connector at the top rear of the transmission. Set the shift cables and bracket into position and tighten the hardware to 18 foot-pounds. Place the shift cables back onto the levers and secure them with the clips. Position the transfer case back onto the transmission. Install and tighten the bolts to 51 foot-pounds. Not shown in the video, install the drive shaft into the transfer case and then secure the drive shaft carrier bearing back into position. Install the output shaft into the driver's side of the transmission. On the driver's side, place the axle into the transmission and then into the hub assembly. At the same time, install the lower ball joint into the knuckle assembly. On the passenger side, place the axle into the transmission, then into the hub assembly. At the same time, install the lower ball joint into the knuckle assembly. On the driver's side, install the bolt and nut securing the ball joint and torque them to 53 foot-pounds. On the passenger side, install the bolt and nut securing the ball joint and torque them to 53 foot-pounds. On the passenger side, install the washer and axle nut and torque it to 107 to 129 foot-pounds. Install a new cotter pin. On the driver's side, install the washer and axle nut and torque it to 107 to 129 foot-pounds. Install a new cotter pin. Install both driver and passenger side wheel and tire assemblies and torque the lug nuts to 73 foot-pounds. Remove the transmission filler plug and fill the transmission using the vehicle manufacturer's specified fluid with the recommended amount. Install the filler plug with a new gasket and tighten it to 32 foot-pounds. Remove the transfer case filler plug and fill the transfer case using the vehicle manufacturer's specified fluid with the recommended amount. Install the filler plug with a new gasket and tighten it to 32 foot-pounds. Install the downpipe, making sure to install the rubber isolators into the hangers. Tighten both the rear and front flange hardware. Place the cross member up into position. You can hold it into position by inserting the motor mount bolt. Line the holes up and insert the bolts. Tighten the bolts to 52 foot-pounds. Not shown in the video, place the nut onto the motor mount bolt and tighten it to 40 foot-pounds. Install the rear subframe support bar followed by the front subframe support bar. Tighten the bolts to 21 foot-pounds. Reconnect the electrical plug at the top of the transmission. Install the battery tray. Place the intake pipe assembly onto the turbo inlet and reconnect the breather hose. Not shown in the video, reconnect the mass airflow sensor. Place the lower charge air cooler outlet pipe into position. Place the upper charge air cooler outlet pipe onto the throttle body and then into the lower pipe. Install the blow-off valve hose onto the upper charge air cooler outlet pipe. Tighten all clamps and install any vacuum hoses that may have been disconnected. Set the battery in position and install and tighten the battery hold down. Reconnect and tighten the battery cables. Install and secure the front bumper and grille assembly. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.